spring there. They're from Brazil, but he speaks Yiddish fluently. Sfaradi speaks Yiddish.
Oh, wow. Okay, so we'll continue. It says...
Let me ask you one question. There it is. Okay, thank you. I need something for your, where I have your name. So, because when it pops up, then, I know who it is.
So you put it in on your contact.
Yeah.
Like I did with you.
Right.
Okay, so
Got a lot of
the
Menashe.
Gemara says, "My botlu b'me'er nami." So it says, what is in fact is the meaning of Rabbi Yehuda's statement that the water was nullified in the cow's intestines? Botlu mituma chamura, aval tuma kolo mitamu, but they still have tuma kalo. They still have some level of impurity. So, just to remind ourselves, we have a cow that drank water of the purification water. So this is, as we said before, it's a paradox that on one hand it's purifying, but if you touch it, it makes you tomeh. If you are not tomeh and you touch it, it makes you tomeh. In this case, the cow drank it. The cow is not tomeh when she's drinking it, but when you shech the cow, if the water is still in its intestines, there's an opinion that says the flesh of the cow is tomeh. But comes Rabbi Yehuda and he says, no, it's not. She's not tameh. Why? Because the water was nullified in her stomach. It became part of her intestines, absorbed in the body, whatever it is, and it's not tameh. So they asked him, okay, fine, maybe it does not have the tuma chamura, the first degree of tuma, but it should at least have some level of tuma. So the Gemara counters miklada tanakama sovar tuma chamura nami tamu. This implies that the Tanakama holds that the water can even contaminate other things with a severe degree of tumah. But the Tanakama state its flesh is tameh, which implies that the water can contaminate only flesh or other foods, which are susceptible even to slight degree of tumah, but not people or utensils, which are susceptible only to a severe degree of tumah. So we can differentiate. We can say that only the flesh becomes tumah, but not people or utensils, the flesh of the cow. Kulo Rabbi Yehuda, the entire Braita is a quotation of the view of Rabbi Yehuda. V'chasur michasro v'achiketani. The Braita's text is missing words, and this is what it should say. So we're rephrasing the case. The scenario. If a cow drank purification water, its flesh is tameh. With what regard to what? In what regard was it stated that the water retains the capacity to convey tumah? Tumah kal. In regard to even a slight degree of tumah. Aval tumah chamura lo, but not severe degree of tumah. Rabbi Yehuda says that the water was nullified in the cow's intestines in the sense that it no longer conveys severe degree of tumah. Okay, so we have tumah kalo, not tumah chamur. Rav Ashi Omar, it's considered a putrid beverage, and there is no tumah at all. Botlu b'me'or legamre. The water is completely nullified in the cow's intestines. Okay, that's the view of Rav Ashi. To foods they are tameh, out of doubt, but in regard to utensils that might have been touched by tameh beverages, the rule is that they are toher, out of doubt. If you look at the diagram for a second, tell me what is the higher degree of tumah, in ochlin or in kalim? From my recollection, it was some kalim has a higher degree of tumah than ochlin.
Yeah, that could be a rishon.
Yes, so kli is higher. In regards to foods that might have been touched by Tome beverages, the rule is that they are Tome out of doubt. But in regard to utensils that might have been touched by Tome beverages, the rule is that they are Toer out of doubt.
What?
Again, in regard to foods
Yes.
that might have been touched by Tome beverages, the rule is that they are Tome out of doubt.
Even though there's a doubt, they're tummy.
We'll consider the Tome when it comes to Ochlin.
Okay.
But in regard to utensils that might have been touched by Tome beverages, the rule is that they are Toher out of doubt. In case of a doubt, Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Shimon,
Because they would be at a Rishon level, as opposed to the Ochlim, which would be at a Sheni level.
I see, but I'm saying I'm not sure if that's the reasoning Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Shimon, why they would,
Oh, forget, yeah.
when it
Take
comes
my
to
reason
out
out
of doubt, yeah.
Yeah, forget that, Kiddush.
Yeah. So Rabbi Yosef Shimon holds, although beverages can contaminate utensils only rabbinically, they can contaminate foods biblically. So in their view, if Ochlin food is worse than Kalim,
It's not
It's
worse,
more
it's
severe.
More susceptible.
more susceptible to a biblical tumor. Because he says, Rabbi Shimon Rabbi Yossi holds that although beverages can contaminate utensils only rabbinically, they can contaminate foods biblically. So the Gemara clarifies this opinion. Amar Rabba Bar Chan, Amar Rish Lakish, Rabbi Yossi b'shitas Rabbi Akiva Rabbi Amor. Rabbi Yossi said this according to the view of his teacher Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva said, the Dorish Itma Yatame, who expound the word Itma, will become Tameh as Yatame, which means it will make other things Tameh. It's one word, it's the same word, but you can read it two different ways. Either you read Itma, that it becomes Tameh, or you read Yatame, that make other things impure. Shall be contaminated or will contaminate. In reference to foods that were exposed to tumah, as it were, to be read, Yatamei shall contaminate, as we will see. Rabbi Akiva derives that tamei foods can impart biblical tumah to other things. Rabbi Yossi similarly expounds the word Yatamei shall be contaminated, that is written in reference to beverages, as if it were to be read Yatamei shall contaminate. He thus derives that beverages have the biblical capacity to impact tumah to certain things. What is the certain things? Rabbi Yossi was one of Rabbi Akiva's 5 principal disciples, as stated in Tractate Pesachim. Rabbi Shimon was also one of those 5 disciples. The reason Rish Lakish singled out Rabbi Yossi here is because, as the Gemara will conclude below, Rabbi Yossi himself does not concur with Rabbi Akiva in regard to this law.
When it says it shall be impure,
Yeah,
what does that mean? Does it
it becomes tameh. It will be
shall
contaminated.
be? That means rather it's definitely going to happen, has to be? Now,
The Torah says in Leviticus 11:34, "V'chol mashke asher ishose, v'chol kli itmo," which means, and any beverage that can be drunk in any vessel shall be tameh. If the vessel is tameh, or if the beverages are tameh, that will make the kli tameh.
Because I was involved with a lawsuit, and this is what saved me. It said, the certain thing shall be in writing. And I don't know, what does that mean, shall be in writing?
I think it's a consequence.
Shall be has an option.
I took it mean that it had to be in writing. And that's how the judge looked at it.
Well, it makes sense. It sounds like it.
Shall be.
It sounds like optional. People can interpret it as an optional.
I guess it means.
It would
has
be
to
better if they would write "should be,"
Right,
and it makes
or
it.
must be.
Yeah.
That's what I was looking for. I wanted to say must be. 'Cause
Uh-huh.
then there's no question, because it wasn't
Right,
in writing.
but that's why a judge has to interpret the law,
Right,
and he interpreted shall be.
yeah. Shall be meaning it had to be.
Right.
And if it wasn't, Just keep it.
So you got it off.
No, so I won. I
Oh,
was
you
suing somebody
won.
else.
What did you want him to have in writing?
They wanted me to have a this group said that I had resigned from a position. I said, I never resigned. And then they have three guys that swore they were in the room when I said, were you there? This happened, it was said. It wasn't true. So
So you argued that even if I did, it needs to be in writing.
I didn't say even if I did, I didn't give that
Right.
as a possibility. There was two things that the three guys told exactly the same story. And one of them was not proficient in English, but he told exactly the same story. And a real judge knows, if we three witness something, you're gonna
Was
tell-
it a jury or a judge?
A judge.
Uh-huh.
You're gonna tell it from your position, but you'll come out with,
Right.
this guy hit
You
that
said
guy.
your way, yeah.
You same thing, you say, well, this guy hit that guy, and I'll say this guy hit that. We all say the same, but we don't say it exactly the same way.
Same words, yeah.
So he that and this shall be, first of all, it wasn't in writing, I didn't sign anything to that effect, number one. Number two, you three told us.
But if they could lie, they could also forge you a paper. They could forge something that you.
Yeah, they could have.
You're
And
lucky
if they
they
were
didn't.
smart, what they would have done at the time, they said, look, if you resign, we'll give you this. And I would have said, I would have taken it.
Right.
Shall be, but shall be means.
You should do it.
Had to be. So
Yeah.
good, that's what I need a judge to interpret, thank you. Bothered me for years. Not bothered, it was a question for this.
So how long did you stay in the job after that?
That's a for bringing story.
I figured after all this crap, you probably didn't want to stay there anymore.
For bringing story.
All
I'm
right.
happy, I'm so happy to tell. Because the Rebbe said I should publicize the story, by the way.
Uh,
That's why I told it to you that day.
Yeah.
The Rebbe said I should publicize this story.
It's a good story.
Baruch Hashem.
Maybe tonight we'll have for Uya Sheva Bochis,
Oh, you're having shit.
so we can come here and
Oh, yeah,
have
I'm
something.
a permanent Dushin because they didn't go to the wedding.
Yeah, very good. So
what time do you do that after davening?
yeah, right after tomorrow.
Or I'll come after I finish it. So we'll come. Whoever's with me in the car,
You saying we shall come?
if you want.
So Rabbi Yossi similarly expounds the word yitma shall be contaminated, that is written in reference to beverages as if it were to be read yatame shall contaminate. He thus derives that beverages have the biblical capacity to impart tuma to certain things. That nan bo bayom dosh Rabbi Akiva, on that day, Rabbi Akiva expounded the following verse: V'chol kli cheres asher yipol mehem, any earthenware vessel into whose interior one of them, a dead sheretz, will fall. Eino omer tome ela yitmo. It does not say tame in the verse, but yitma, which can be read as yetame. This implies that besides being contaminated, yetame acherim, it has the capacity to contaminate other things as well. Limed al kikar sheni shoysa shlishi bechulin. This teaches concerning a loaf of bread that is sheni, such as a loaf that is inside an earthenware oven, into which a sheretz has fallen. Now the kikar touched the oven that touched the sheretz, so the kikar is sheni, the loaf of bread is sheni, and now it makes shlishi, shoysa shlishi b'chulin, that it can create a shlishi even in the case of chulin. So that this is the teaching of Rabbi Akiva. The Torah says an earthenware vessel into which in interior one of them, a dead sheretz, will fall. So he says it's not just tome, it's yitmo. It will cause other things to be tome as well. And how does Rabbi Yossi expound the pasuk to arrive at the conclusion that beverages can contaminate only foods? Chol mashka shirishose v'chol kli itma. And any beverage that can be drunk in any vessel shall be tameh. Yetameh, the word yetameh can be read as, the word itma can be read as yetameh, which teaches le'olam letameh tumas ochlin, that beverages have the capacity to contaminate foods. Atayimu letameh tumas ochlin, or ein ola letameh tumas mashkin. You say it teaches that beverages have the capacity to contaminate foods. Perhaps the pasuk does not mean to teach this, but rather it means to teach that beverages have the capacity to contaminate beverages. You must say this was not the intention. What is the evidence that this was not the intention? We never find an edible tome item that can make something of its own nature tome like itself, meaning it transmits the same level of tumah. We never find an edible tome item that can make something of its own nature tome like itself. Therefore, the intention must be that beverages can contaminate foods rather than beverages. You contaminate food but not beverages. From the text of the pasuk itself, it is also clear that you cannot say yitma letame tumas mashkin, that the exposition of the word yitma comes to teach that beverages have the capacity to contaminate beverages. For the pasuk says yitma twice, first in reference to foods that are in a tame earthenware vessel, and again in reference to beverages that are in the vessel. These hakadaitach yitma the sefer letame tumas mashkin, yitma dereisha nami letame tumas mashkin. Now, if you should think that the word itma of the latter clause comes to allude that beverages have the capacity to contaminate beverages, I will point out the word yitma of the former clause similarly alludes that foods have the capacity to contaminate beverages. Ni'arvinu v'nichtevinu. Accordingly, scripture should have combined the reference to foods and beverages and written them in one long clause, with the word yitma appearing only once. Mikol, the pasuk says, Mikol ha'oichel asher ya'ochel. Any food that can be eaten, asher yovoy olav mayim, upon which water comes, v'chol mashke, or any beverage, asher ishose, that can be drunk, b'chol kli, in any vessel, yitma shall be tameh. Terei yitma lamali. Why does it say tu yitma? Why do I need two clauses containing two mentions of the word itma? Ela itma dereisha letame tumas mashkin, itma deseifa letame tumas ochlin. Itma of the former clause come to teach that foods have the capacity to contaminate beverages, whereas the itma of the latter clause comes to teach that beverages have the capacity to contaminate foods. So it goes both ways. Neither foods nor beverages, however, have the capacity to contaminate things of their own nature. But perhaps I can say that the latter itma teaches that beverages have the capacity to contaminate utensils. The question is rebuffed. V'lav kal v'chemru. Is this not a clear? Is it not clear on the basis of kal v'chemru that beverages cannot contaminate utensils? Uma kli shemetame mashke ein metame kli. If even the utensil that contaminated this beverage utensil that contaminate the beverage,
Right.
i.e., the earthen vessel into which a sheretz fell cannot contaminate a utensil. The earthenware vessel into which a sheretz fell cannot contaminate a utensil. It says in 20, our entire discussion focuses on beverages that were contaminated by entering an earthenware vessel that had been contaminated by a sheretz. So the earthenware vessel was contaminated by a sheretz. Now liquid went into, a beverage went into this kli. So he tells me, the Gemara says, if even the utensil that contaminated this beverage, the earthenware vessel into which a sheretz fell cannot contaminate a utensil, is unable to contaminate utensils, only contaminate what's in it. Mashkin aboin machamas kli. Then regarding the beverages that became tameh on account of entering this utensil, and are thus on a lower level of tumah than the utensil itself. Obviously, the first tumah is the kli. The second tumah is the beverage that went into it. No, it's not so difficult.
Too much information.
Yeah, you have
In English, to process.
this is a kli, right? The sheretz touch the kli.
Okay.
Right? So sheretz touch the kli. Sheretz.
Yeah, has something go inside it?
The sheretz could be touched from the one in. It went into.
Because the outside, the inside also.
Let's say it went in. For our discussion, the kli is tameh. Okay, kli is tameh inside and out.
Okay.
Now a liquid went in. Now this liquid, what level of tumah does it have? So it says if the kli is rishon, the tumah, so the beverage will be second, right?
Yeah.
So it says mashkin aboy mechamas kli. Then regarding beverages that became tumah on account of entering this utensil. Why the liquid is tumah? Because the kli is tumah,
Right.
and are thus on a lower level of tumah than the utensil itself.
Right.
This has a high level of tumah, this has less level of tumah. Is it not logical that they should not be able to contaminate utensils? This should be able to contaminate other utensils. This is tameh. If it makes this tameh, it should make also utensils.
Yeah, but we don't use logic. We use Hashem's logic.
It's about the liquid. The liquid
That's the kal v'chomer. This is at least the kal v'chomer. The ema. But can I still say, kiloi mitamu, when is it true that beverages do not contaminate utensils? Beverages do not contaminate utensils. Mashkin aboy mechamas kli. It's only in a case where the beverage that became tameh on account of entering an earthenware utensil into which a sheretz had fallen, for it is regarding such beverage that your kal v'chomer is applicable. Aval mashkin aboy mechamas sheretz, in regard to beverages that became tameh on account of touching a sheretz itself, achanami demitamu, perhaps it is indeed so that they can contaminate utensils, for the sheretz itself can also contaminate utensils. This is like this. Yeah, we have to differentiate it to two different cases. Case number one is the case that we mentioned, that the liquid touched kli that is tameh. Why the kli is tameh? Because there was sheretz in there. Right now it's not there, but the kli is tameh because of the sheretz. Second case is the liquid is tameh, the beverage is tameh because it touched the kli and the sheretz itself. So I had direct contact with the sheretz. So maybe I can argue.
But then it's. I'm sorry.
It's fine. So I'm
Now
saying
the liquid is
maybe I can
sufficient.
argue that this beverage, the first case, the beverage does not have the power to transmit tumah to utensils. Why? Because it only touched the kli that touched the sheretz. Yeah. But what happened if the liquid is touched the sheretz directly? Maybe it will have the power. Isn't it a kal v'chomer that it has the power to make other utensils tameh? So, in other words, we're saying, in a case of direct contact with sheretz, if the liquid has direct contact with sheretz, maybe the liquid should be able to cause utensils tummy.
Because it's rishon.
If you remember, before we said that if liquid touches food, it makes it tummy, but if it touches utensils, it doesn't make it tummy. We just read before. We have a doubt of tuma. We say even though it's a doubt of tuma, we have a doubt in the case of ochlin. We'll decide in that case that it's tameh, and we have a doubt in the case of utensils. We'll rule tahor. We'll say that it's tahor. So now he wants to say what happened if the beverage has direct contact with the sheretz. Shouldn't this beverage be able to contaminate the kelim also, the utensils?
A keli cannot contaminate another keli. A kli cannot contaminate a kli, right? So here's this kli, it's tamei, and the water, the liquid goes in, and now the liquid is tamei, right? So when I put that water into another kli, it's really kli to kli. So it makes sense that it wouldn't become tamei. Even though the water got it, they got it from a kli.
So it would make sense that you're saying it would make sense that the kli wouldn't.
It could not make it.
So the Gemara is trying to differentiate now. What happened if this liquid directly touched the sheretz, and now it's transferring it to another kli?
So that's completely different because it touched avatuma.
Yeah, it's rishon.
Okay.
It happened to touch. Yeah, it happened to touch the kli also. Okay, so what? It touched the sheretz.
So now that's the. So that's what the Gemara is trying to say. That's the kal v'chomer.
Capability to transmit.
Yes.
So
exactly. That was what I was thinking.
Perhaps it is indeed so that they can contaminate utensils, for the sheretz itself can also contaminate utensils.
Right, because the sheretz good and the kli can't.
Right. So the Gemara reject this question as well.
Duh.
The Gemara says. The Gemara
Why
says.
should be a pleasure?
Mashkin aboy mechamas sheretz miksive. Are beverages that became tameh on account of touching a sheretz ever mentioned explicitly in scripture? Question mark. The Gemara says no! Exclamation mark. It was never written about beverages that became tameh on account of touching a sheretz.
In scripture, it doesn't say like throwing straight back either.
So scripture never states explicitly that a beverage becomes tameh by touching a sheretz, which is an interesting concept. It says,
oh, because the sheretz was in the keli.
no, it might be the sheretz does not have the capacity to make a beverage tameh, which is an interesting, because it doesn't say it explicitly. So let's see, v'lav mikal v'chemer kasi, but the Gemara says, 1 second. Rather, is it not derived by means of a kal v'chemer that a beverage which touches a sheretz is tameh? Question mark. Isn't that a kal v'chemer? If the sheretz can make a kli tameh, why can't it make the beverages tameh? If the kli that touches the sheretz make the beverage that goes into it tameh, let's say a sheretz touches cup, right? It makes the liquid tameh, right? So how much more so if the sheretz touch directly the beverage?
Yeah. Maybe the kli concentrates the energy.
You say it contains it somewhat,
and like a step up transformer. Now it's not just it's just not touching it; it's touching it with the power of the kli becoming. But
all the power, all the tuma that the kli has is coming from the sheretz.
Okay.
So if there's direct contact from sheretz to, it's actually in the laws of electricity. It makes sense what you're saying, because you can have a powerful electricity coming out, but if you're not creating the circle, right? If there's no, I forgot the terminology, the circuit, it's not gonna kick in. So sometimes by you
Stepping in the water, then you're in trouble.
no, I'm saying it's like if you need the positive and the negative.
Right.
If you just have the positive, by you touching, you are the negative now, and that's why you're creating the circuit, and you can be electrocuted.
Right.
Chas v'shalom.
Chas v'shalom.
Right. But it's interesting when you're gonna go jumpstart a car, you put the positive on a positive and a negative on a negative, and then you start.
I tried it, doesn't do anything. It just go, and not much happens.
What
No,
is
you
it?
don't put it to the negative, you put it to the,
Positive to the positive, negative to the negative.
no, you put the positive, and then negative to the car.
Right, that's
not
the
to
ground.
Negative terminal,
Oh.
That's the ground.
yeah.
Yeah, but you can put it on the negative also.
Right, I
Yeah,
always
but-
do it that way,
Yeah.
'cause it has two clips, and then I
Yeah.
turn the engine on of the good car, and then the dead car starts.
Yeah.
Then you can start the dead car.
In Brazil,
But you're creating a
yesterday,
circuit.
they assembled these big trees, Christmas trees.
Yeah.
So one family, they were at home 10 months, taking care because of the COVID, and they went out to outside
And the tree fell
to
that's
take
a-
pictures of this tree.
Yeah.
It was almost ready,
Yeah.
but the electricity was not 100%. So they took a picture. The girl, 8 years old, touched the tree, died right away
Wow.
in front of his family. 10 months after being home, 10 months.
They didn't go out of their house for 10 months.
Yeah.
They came out to see the tree and they
They
died.
took the picture with her, and she died 30 seconds after.
So
Every year happens.
the lesson of the story is not to look at the tree, not to go out to see the tree.
And when your time is up, your time is up.
It could have, the menorahs, with the electric menorahs, you could have
It's dangerous. It's sorry.
I mean, this kind of
So,
electric
so the
menorah.
Gemara says, "V'lam kal v'chemer kosi." Is it not derived by means of a kal v'chemer that a beverage which touches a sheretz is tameh? And the kal v'chemer is as follows. Okay, so keep try to focus to understand the kal v'chemer.
Just before we do that, if you put a turbocharge on an engine, right, you're gonna get a lot more out of that. And it's gonna burn more gas, it's gonna put a lot of pressure into the engine, but you're gonna fly. So here you have this sheretz that touches the liquid, but now the sheretz is inside this kli, and it touches it. It could be, it's turbocharging the,
Magnifies it.
the magnifies the tumah.
There's no argument about that. The question is why, if we're trying to see what happens when there's direct contact between liquid and sheretz, what happens then? Is it reduced? Is it magnified? Is it
Or is it
what is it?
non-existent?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
So he says, since it's not mentioned, we have to try to learn it from a kal v'chemer. So here's the kal v'chemer. Uma mashkin aboim mechamas kli metamin. If beverages that become tameh on account of being contained in an earthenware vessel that had been contaminated by a sheretz can contaminate other things, mashkin aboim mechamas sheretz lakol sheken. Then in regard to beverages that became tameh on account of touching a sheretz itself, is it not obvious that they can contaminate other things? Question mark. And since this kal v'chemer is the source of the rule that beverages which are contaminated by a sheretz can contaminate other things, we apply the principle. What is the principle? Dayoy levo min adin li'es kanida. It is sufficient for the derived law to be the same as the source law, just as in the source case. What was the source case? Beverages that are contaminated by an earthenware vessel that had been contaminated by a sheretz. That was the main. So the law is, in that case, that they can contaminate only foods but not utensils. Okay? So this liquid now that you're taking from here can contaminate food but not utensil. So too, in the derived case, beverages that are contaminated by touching a sheretz itself, the law is that they can contaminate only foods.
Slowly, say it again. So too.
In the derived case,
Yeah.
beverages that are contaminated by touching a sheretz itself, remember it was not mentioned directly,
Right.
so it's derived case. Beverages that are contaminated by touching a sheretz itself, the law is that they can contaminate only foods but not utensils. So
Food's more easily contaminated.
We should read number one.
they're contaminating. It says to simplify the whole thing, we were wondering what would be the case if a sheretz touches directly beverages, and the Gemara says, since it was not spoken about explicitly, we have to learn it from the case at hand. What was the source case of beverages that went into a kli that was tameh by a sheretz?
Yeah.
Now these beverages can contaminate food, but not utensils. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So the same thing will be with liquid that touched sheretz directly, can contaminate, limits to its contamination is limited to food, but not the utensils. That's what he said. Because the case of sheretz touching directly beverages is baminadin, is not directly spoken about. It's indirectly spoken about. Even though it's seemingly, direct contact, it says no, it's limited to this, to contaminating food, not utensils. Having clarified the meaning of
It's really clear.
of the latter itma, which is the source of Rabbi Yossi's rule that beverages can contaminate only foods biblically, the Gemara turns its attention to the former itma, which Rabbi Akiva expounded as teaching that foods can contaminate other things. The Gemara seeks to clarify which other things can be contaminated by foods. We have Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi is the Talmid of Rabbi Akiva, one of his main Talmidim.
His father.
Yeah, and he doesn't per se agrees with Rabbi Akiva on this. He mentions Rabbi Akiva, but it's not necessarily his opinion. Because Rabbi Akiva is seemingly more machmir. He says that
his father?
in the early generation where you had Tanoim were allowed to say things that is against or opposite or different. In the Amoira, when it was lower generation, the generation of the Amoraim, they cannot argue with the Tanoim. They can try to explain them, but they cannot argue with them in terms of saying, "Oh, I disagree with this Tana."
Right.
So halacha followed Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yossi, or vice versa, but Amoira doesn't have the power to contradict the Tana. Rabbi Akiva expounded his teaching that foods can contaminate other things. The Gemara seeks to clarify which other things can be contaminated by foods. Itma dereisha chidosh. How does Rabbi Akiva expound the word itma of the verse former clause? It is as follows: Kol lo yichel asher yochel asher yovel of mayim itma. The pasuk states of any food that can be eaten, upon which water comes, shall be tameh. Yetameh, the word itma can be read as yetameh, which teaches letame tamashkin that food has the capacity to contaminate beverages. So you have a sandwich that became tameh, that sandwich now can make beverages tameh according to Rabbi Akiva. Okay? What sandwich was it? Shmuel?
Salami.
Okay.
It was roast beef.
Ahmad, you can eat in the morning a roast beef sandwich.
In Argentina, they could.
Yeah.
We don't have a good deli here. Yeah, you can make a deli.
The deli, the aroma has a deli. It's not
What is deli?
Deli is like a stove that just has it's a small stove. It does meat, sandwiches just with cold cuts.
Ah, okay.
New York delis are known to have
Yeah, they used to have.
those
And
sandwiches.
the famous sandwich was what? The
It
Reuben.
doesn't have to be big.
pastrami.
It doesn't have to be. They put pastrami and what else? They put
Pickles.
Well,
pickles.
there's
Corned beef.
And
there's
they
something else
stick
called-
in it.
Thing.
Oh, yeah.
And with a
Toothpick.
pickle.
A toothpick.
And
and the way it's wrapped, you can't wrap it. The way
I'm getting hungry.
you always see the way it's wrapped. Oh, how
Rabbi, you know the word salami in Hebrew? I was in my grandmother's house and I wanted to eat salami and I didn't know how to say in Hebrew.
Yeah.
And my father told me when I was in Brazil, but I stayed there for 2 months and I wanted to eat this and I couldn't eat. I didn't eat.
Right.
But then I remember the name is naknik. Do you
Right.
know this name?
Right, it's a hot dog.
It's famous, naknik.
Yeah. It's like a bologna, a hot dog.
Naknik.
But this deli sandwiches, it could be different kinds of meat, sliced turkey or sliced
Together?
roast beef or sliced
Yeah, yeah.
together or by itself. You put mustard on it,
okay.
very nice. Or you could go to Shmuel's house Friday night, and his wife makes deli roll, which has these sliced meats in it,
Right,
you know, in a kind of a pastry,
Wow.
cool.
and they had mustard also.
Right. I just finished it last night.
Good wife, Shmuel.
Yeah, Baruch Hashem.
Yeah, so, eat ma deresh היחידוש מכל אורך אשר יאכל יבוא למים טעם לטעמס המשקין. אתם לטעם לטמשקין או אינו לטעמס הכלי. Perhaps the pasuk does not mean to teach this, but rather it means to teach that a food has the capacity to contaminate a utensil.
The plot thickens.
So maybe food does not contaminate beverages. Maybe we can say that food can contaminate utensils. So remember, instead of the sandwich touching the liquid, the sandwich now is touching the kli. Amad kal v'chemer, you must say we can derive by means of a kal v'chemer that a food cannot contaminate a utensil. Why? What's the kal v'chemer? Why food cannot contaminate utensil? Uma mashke shemetame oichel. Einu metame kli, if even a tame beverage, which can contaminate a food. Mashke can make food tame. Liquid beverage can make food tame. So let's say the liquid here touches your sandwich, can make it tame,
But not the clip.
but cannot contaminate a utensil. Oichel she'eno metame oichel. Then in regard to food, tame food, which cannot contaminate a food, meaning my sandwich cannot contaminate your sandwich. Food cannot make food tame. Oichlin. It's the same category.
Okay.
Oichel she'en metame oichel. Then in regard to a tame food, which cannot contaminate food, as we shall derive below, Eino din shelo yetame kli. Is it not logical that food should not be able to contaminate a utensil?
If it can't contaminate food, it shouldn't contaminate kli. All right.
Yeah.
That's what it says. All right.
No, but it goes a little bit. You have to go a little before. So it says, a liquid makes food tame,
True.
but it does not have the power to make a kli tame.
The liquid can make the kli tame.
No.
No.
It can make the food tame,
Not the clip.
but not the kli. Okay.
Yeah.
So
That's,
food that cannot make food tame,
yeah.
how much more so it should not be able to make the kli tame?
Yeah.
This is the kal v'chomer.
Easy.
Yeah. All right. Watch. I'm gonna go after this.
You're right. You're right. I don't get it. I saw you look.
Right, I need the board.
Yeah.
But this one is easy.
Beverage
Go ahead.
beverage makes food tame,
Yeah.
given, but it doesn't make kelim tame.
Right.
Okay, beverage make food, doesn't make kli tame. Food, on the other hand,
Doesn't
cannot
make
make food tame.
Right.
Much more.
So beverage seemingly has more power over here, because beverage can make food tameh, but food itself cannot make other food tameh. Meaning, okay, so
Yeah, I don't see it as more power, I see like and like don't contaminate each other. Two kalim don't, if I put a kli with a kli, does it
right
contaminate it?
doesn't.
No, it doesn't have more power, it has a different power.
Okay, so
I think.
yeah, but if we judge by what happens, meaning I go to a Rav, I said to him, liquid, I know it's tameh, it touched my sandwich. He says to me, your sandwich is tameh.
Right.
If I tell him the sandwich that I have that is tameh touched your sandwich, he tells me it's not tameh. So now I have another question to him. I said to him, Rabbi, this sandwich that you told me touched your sandwich didn't make it tameh, then it touched my pot, a kli.
Because a pot is susceptible from tumor from.
So
opening.
he would
But
tell
opening, no.
So he would tell me that the sandwich, tameh sandwich that touched the pot, doesn't make it tameh. Does not make. Food does not have the power to make kli tameh. I would say to him, why? Why should if the sandwich is tameh, why shouldn't it make the kli tameh also? I took the sandwich, I put it in a 9x13. It doesn't make it tameh. Why? So he will tell me this kal v'chomer, that since liquid has the power to make a food tameh, but it does not have the power to make a kli tameh.
The same way the food.
The same way the food
doesn't have the power.
the food doesn't have the power to do that.
Okay.
To strike out a kli is harder. That's what we see. To strike out
Well
this pot is harder.
Yeah.
Why? Because the liquid wasn't able to do it. It was only able to do it to food. And food doesn't even have the power to contaminate other food. So therefore, food is out. Food does not able to contaminate.
The kli is safe.
To contaminate
You don't have to
kli.
smash the earthenware vessel.
Yeah. So what am I doing with the word yatame or yitma? Accordingly, how shall I interpret the word yitma, which teaches that a tameh food can contaminate other things? What other things? If you just told me that food cannot contaminate other food, then it cannot contaminate utensils. So what else does it make tameh? Latame es hamashkin. So it says it has the capacity to contaminate beverages, she'en alulim lekabel tuma, which are prone to acquiring tuma. The Gemara will explain below in what way they are prone to acquire tuma. So, food, according to this, can make beverages tameh. Okay? The same way that a beverage can make food tameh, a food would make a beverage tameh. That's what seemingly the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. My area mashkin mishum dalul lekabel tuma. What is the point of proving that the pasuk means a food can contaminate beverages on the basis that they are prone to acquire tumor? What does it mean? Tipo klemishum delay kamid yachin. Let this be derived simply because there is nothing else that a food can possibly contaminate. So
that's what all this left over. So, and saying it can contaminate something. So, since it can't be the other two, it has to be the liquid.
What is it? So he says, for since you have proven that a food cannot contaminate utensils, and we shall see below that a food cannot contaminate foods, to what can the verse refer other than contamination of beverages? What left? So achikom, or this is what we meant to say. We derive from a kal v'chomer that since a beverage cannot contaminate a utensil, it is logical that a tameh food, which is subject to a more lenient rule than a tameh beverage, and so far it cannot contaminate foods, also cannot contaminate a utensil. Now, if you should object and say that in fact a tome food is subject to a more stringent rule than a tome beverage. A tome food is subject to a more stringent rule than a tome beverage, for it can contaminate beverages, whereas a tome beverage cannot contaminate beverages. So we can say that maybe food it has some, I don't know if superiority, but to say that food can contaminate.
Strength, maybe you say.
Yeah. You didn't like the word, it has more power.
I know. That was earlier in the segment.
Because you're saying they're two different things, right? But if you argue that since a food has the power to contaminate beverage, is more chamur, the tumah on the food is a little bit more severe, more stronger tumah. Nitamya lekli, and thus a food should be able to contaminate a kli, even though a beverage cannot contaminate a kli. Au chumra de mashkin hu. That rule that a tome food can contaminate beverages is a stringency that stems from the nature of beverages, not from that of food. So it's not because the food has more strength, it's rather that the beverage is more susceptible. Is a weaker, the beverage are weaker.
Yeah, right.
Why? Why beverages are weak? Mishum de mashkin alul lekabel tumah, because beverages are prone to acquiring tumah. Umay aliloson, and in what way they are prone to acquiring more tumah? Shemekablim tumah shaloi behechsher, in that they acquire tumah even without advanced preparation. Shemekablim tumah shaloi behechsher, in that they acquire tumah even without advanced preparation. By contrast, foods must be prepared for acquiring tumah by first being wetted.
So it's raw.
Beverage is ready to go. Is accepting tumah immediately.
You don't have to add water to it.
Yeah.
So you have
Yeah.
so if you have a dry sandwich and you pour mashkin that's tumor already, it doesn't make it tumor like that. It has to already be wet. The sandwich had to be wet, and then you pour the
No, because the example that I said sandwich was just to get us. But it's not a good example because we're talking when you say ochlin, they mean produce like
okay, so
like
an apple or a celery or whatever.
so for the apple to contract tumah, it needs to be wet.
So if this apple is perfectly dry and I put the tumor mashkin on it, nothing happens.
Nothing happens. But if it was moist and it had some, it was
Okay,
wet,
which goes to
now it makes it susceptible to tumah.
Okay.
And so he says that there is a difference between food and beverages because food needs to be prepared to acquire tumah, and beverages don't.
Okay.
Beverage is ready to rock and roll.
Ready to rock and roll.
So maybe that's why we say l'chaim on a liquid rather than.
Because ready to go.
I see you guys discriminate. If it's not single malt, you're not touching it.
That's right. I don't like blended.
I would touch it. No one poured any for me, so.
So itma, the verse actually reads, itma shall be contaminated rather than yet tameh shall contaminate. It's amazing. It's just one vowel that changes the meaning between itma and yet tameh. The en oise kayotze bo. This teaches that a tame food or beverage cannot make something of its own nature tame like itself. A food cannot contaminate a food, and a beverage cannot contaminate a beverage. Since the pasuk does not specify what a food or beverage cannot contaminate, it is logical to say that the exclusion pertains to the same thing that is mentioned in the verse. Mehocha nafko, the Gemara asks, is this rule derived from here? Mehosam nafko, it is derived from there, from the what is there. The following pasuk, pasuk says, "V'chiyutan mayim al zera v'nofal minivlosum olav tomei hu." If water has been placed on a seed and their carcass, the carcass of a sheretz falls upon it, it is tomei to you. Uhu tomei ve'en oisetumu kayotze bo. The seed itself is indeed tomei, but it cannot create a tomei object of its own nature. It cannot contaminate other food. We derive by analogy that a tomei beverage also cannot contaminate another beverage. Why must the previous verse teach the same rule? The Gemara answers, "Chad b'mashkin aboin mechamas sheretz, v'chad b'mashkin aboin mechamas kli." One pasuk deals with beverages that became tameh on account of touching a sheretz, and the other one deals with beverages that became tameh on account of entering earthenware vessel that was contaminated by a sheretz. We're going back to the same discussion we had before. Utzriche, the pasuk, both psukim are necessary. If the Torah had informed us that a beverage cannot contaminate another beverage regarding beverages that became tameh on account of entering an earthenware vessel that was contaminated by a sheretz, I might have said that this limitation applies to such beverages. Why? Mishum deloi chamire, because they're not carrying the severe tumah. Aval b'mashkin aboim v'chamas sheretz, but regarding beverages that became tameh on account of touching a sheretz itself, da chamire, now carrying a severe tumah, Ema, I might have said, oise tumo kayotze bo, I might have said that in such a case, such beverage can create a tameh object of its own nature, meaning one beverage would make another beverage tameh. The Torah therefore needed to state that even a beverage that was contaminated by a sheretz itself cannot contaminate other beverages. See, because you could have said, beverage cannot contaminate other beverage. Why? Because it doesn't have a severe tumor. Why doesn't it? Why it does not have a severe tumor? Because it only touched the kli. It didn't touch the sheretz itself. The sheretz touched the kli, and the beverage touched the kli. So only then I would say the beverage doesn't contaminate another beverage. Mm-hmm. But what happened if the beverage touched the sheretz itself? Maybe it should be able to contaminate another beverage.
Paraduma is an exception of the rule because it contaminates the Kohen.
But it's two different items, two different things. We are trying to speak about a case where it's the same type of a thing. Liquid with liquid, beverage with beverage, okay. Food with food, utensil to utensils. So he says that beverages do not contaminate other beverages. In the case of the cow that drank the water, right?
I'm not in the cow. The Kohen that touches this
water. The Kohen that touches...
He got contaminated by the water.
So beverage contaminate people, but not beverage.
Okay.
That's fine. Okay. No one argues. Fine. You touches we touching tameh beverage, you can become tameh.
Okay. If this beverage touches directly the sheretz.
Beverage touched a direct sheretz, it doesn't make it more potent.
Okay.
It doesn't add to it.
Okay.
So that I would say now it's capable to transmit tumah to another beverage.
Okay.
It still doesn't do.
Okay.
That's why there's two psukim that are telling me the same thing.
Slightly off topic, but to get rid of this tuba, mikveh, and then nightfall?
The person who touched, what was the case?
Oh, so it depends on how close
What type of tumor was it? like we said in the beginning of the shiur, that the tumas mates that you can go to the mikveh till tomorrow. It's not going to do it. If
without the power of doing it.
that's why that's why we have this. It says that the death in the world is associated with tuma. How do we purify ourselves from tumas mace? From a tuma, from a paraduma. We don't have paraduma.
Right.
Nobody's pure from that tumor. If a baby is born in a hospital, the moment it comes out,
Boom.
he's tummy. Why? Because somebody is in the hospital dead or died yesterday, and love is in the air.
How does it go
And
into
that's
the
it.
doctor?
What?
They can't.
How can a Cohen
They
become
can't.
a doctor? I had a guy who's not religious, Cohen. He said, so it's a big hassle.
Ask our friend Chaim Cohen. He's not.
He's a podiatrist.
No, but his name is Cohen. He's not a
He's
Cohen.
not a Cohen.
Yeah.
No, but I was.
Sounds like he is though,
I
doesn't
was,
it?
Yeah.
I was with the doctor in my old job. He was a Cohen, and he's not. And he's made him crazy. Like he has to work on corpses to learn the trade.
Right.
He didn't know all this,
Right.
and I don't know. I said, how could it be that a Cohen could be a medical doctor if you got to learn off of corpses, off of
I think they can't be, right?
There must be a way they are. There's so many of them that are. Look, I go to a guy who's a Cohen for my skin. He had to learn off of whatever.
It's pikuach nefesh. A Kohen is allowed to contaminate himself in a situation of pikuach nefesh.
Right. So,
So the doctor is.
so his training is considered pikuach nefesh then.
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good.
So the Gemara says, "Milta de'ase b'kal v'chemer." Oh, v'leshaminan mashkin aboim v'chamas. But the Torah should have informed us of this rule regarding beverages that became tameh on account of touching a sheretz itself. For mashkin aboim v'chamas kli, and we would have known that certainly beverages that became tameh on account of entering an earthenware vessel that was contaminated by sheretz cannot contaminate other beverages. So the Gemara answers, Milta da'asta b'kal v'chemer torach v'koser lakos. Something that could have been derived through a kal v'chemer, Scripture may sometimes take the trouble to write it explicitly. Amar leRavina leRavashi ve'omar Rava. But Rava said, Lo Rabbi Yossi sovar ki Rabbi Akiva, ve'lo Rabbi Akiva sovar ki Rabbi Yossi. Neither does Rabbi Yossi hold like Rabbi Akiva, nor Rabbi Akiva holds like Rabbi Yossi. Amar lei, Rabbi Yossi v'shet Rabbi Akiva Rabbi Amor. Rabbi Yossi said his previously cited ruling according to the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, his teacher, ve'lei loy sevir aleh. But he himself does not concur with Rabbi Akiva in this regard. The Gemara examines Rava's statement that Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yossi do not agree or concur with each other. Amar le Ravashi Rav Kahana. Bishlema Rabbi Yossi l'sover Rabbi Akiva. It is understandable that Rava concluded that Rabbi Yossi does not hold like Rabbi Akiva, that a sheni can create a shlishi in the case of chulin. Rabbi Akiva says sheni can create a shlishi, but Rabbi Yossi does not hold like it. And Ravashi challenges it. Amar Rabbi Yossi, the Tanya Rabbi Yossi, menayin l'Revi b'kodesh u'posel. From where do we derive concerning a Revi, fourth degree of Tuma, in the case of Kodesh, that it is unfit. Vedinu, it is a kal v'chemer. Uma mechusar kippurim. Shemutar b'srum apostle v'kodesh, if even a mechusar kippurim, who is permitted to eat truma, mechusar kippurim, who is permitted to eat teruma, is unfit to eat kodesh. What is mechusar kippurim?
17.
One who immersed to be purified of tuma and waited until nightfall, but has not yet brought the offering that his or her purification requires.
Mm-hmm.
So he did all the steps, went to the mikvah,
Where you bring-
waited till the night, but did not bring the korban.
So that's different than the Tavo Yom.
Yes, is a different degree of tuma. Mechusar kippurim. He's lacking. He's deficient of the kapara of the atonement.
So the guy who was a total yom during the day, at nighttime, if he doesn't bring the korban, then he becomes this.
He just stays in that state until
Right.
he brings the korban, yeah?
Correct.
Okay.
With nightfall, it's like someone that made a pledge and he didn't pay it, so
Yeah.
he still owes the.
There's a guy who made $1 million pledge to UJA. And he was on a boat with his wife, and they actually got lost, and they ended up on some island. And the wife says, "Did you make a pledge to UJA?" He goes, "Yeah." "How much did you make?" She said, "I pledged $1 million." So she says, "Did you pay it?" He said, "No, I didn't pay it." So she says, "Oh, good, so they'll come and find us."
Now they'll find us.
They'll come looking for us.
So it says, with nightfall, the person's state of tuma is reduced to the degree that it no longer prevents him from eating teruma. However, the vestige of tuma is still disqualifies him from eating kodesh. So he can eat teruma, not
So
kodesh,
he gives the check.
until he brings the offering. So
We're gonna give you the
it's
slower
different level.
just
It's
to
different level.
We're gonna keep you here.
Yes.
You get this? Right? That's what they're doing? You didn't pay up full yet. We're gonna keep you here, so we're giving you a little
No
sugar.
Kodesh for
But
you.
not
Not
Kodesh.
Kodesh yet, you know,
To the check.
till the check
Yeah.
is.
So the Gemara says, "V'dinu ma mechusar kippurim." This guy is mechusar kippurim. Shemutar betruma, apostle b'kodesh. He's allowed to eat truma, but is not allowed. Is unfit to eat kodesh. Shlishi, sheposel betruma, concerning a shlishi, which is unfit. In the case of truma, shlishi, a person that is a third degree of truma, right, is not even allowed to eat truma. Eino din shiasar revi b'kodesh. Is it not logical that he should create a revi in the case of kodesh? What does it mean? He should create a revi. Create a revi. It's easy. Third make fourth. But in the case of kodesh, it says the tuma of mechusar kippurim is less severe than the tuma of shlishi level. So we want to say that the shlishi, since he has a more severe tuma than mechusar kippurim, if he touches you, he should make you revi that you're unable to eat kodesh. You are able to eat truma and unable to eat kodesh. So the Gemara says, we can use this kal v'chomer? Because the shlishi has more tuma than mechusar kippurim. Mechusar kippurim can eat truma, not kodesh. So if I'm shlishi and I'm touching you, you're kohen. Do I have that capacity to make you revi, and by making you revi, you shouldn't be able to eat kochim, strike you out of kochim? Okay, so that's the question they go. We learned that a shlishi is tameh in the case of kodesh from an explicit verse in the Torah. If I'm shlishi, I'm not allowed to eat kodesh. And that a revi is unfit in the case of kodesh through kal v'chomer. So shlishi is not allowed to eat.
For sure, if he is not.
Shlishi is not allowed in the case, no, because revi you would say that it has less tuma. Shlishi is not allowed to eat kodesh in the Torah, from the Torah, explicit verse in the Torah. The shlishi cannot eat kodesh. Urevi mikal v'chomer, and that a revi is unfit through a kal v'chomer. What's the kal v'chomer? Look at 20. It says one might have thought to refute the previous kal v'chomer by citing the principle of dayoi. It is sufficient, for since the source of the kal v'chomer is the law, the truma is disqualified on the shlishi level. The kal v'chomer should be able to teach that only kodesh is similarly disqualified on the shlishi level. Kodesh. We learned that Kodesh is subject to contamination even on the Revi level. Shlishi Minater. So the Gemara, okay. So the Gemara says, where we find Shlishi Minater? You say the Shlishi is Tome in the case of Kodesh from an explicit verse, explicit pasuk in the Torah. What is it? Dichtiv. The pasuk says like this: La'aboso asher yiga b'chol Tome lo ya'ochel. And the meat that touches anything Tome shall not be eaten. Mila skina denoga b'sheni. Since the pasuk refers to meat that touches anything Tome, we are not dealing with even with a case where it touched a sheni. An explicit verse teaches that Kodesh, which touches a sheni, and therefore becomes a shlishi, is unfit for consumption. Revi mikal v'chemer, and we derive that a revi is unfit in the case of Kodesh through a kal v'chemer kedamrinan, as we stated above. So we'll dig into it more tomorrow. It's Hashem.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
This reminds, my neighbor across the street was a rabbi, and the only thing I learned from him was about the Torah